that's quite a tall task. Somebody. But yeah, I think it'll be okay. It's just a strange transition, which I wanted to try and express.
So is that readjustment something that comes into the title? Does he see this coming back not as another deployment or redeployment?
Right. Redeployment is a word that's used in the military to describe exactly what he's done. Okay, but obviously I'm using it as a pun. Yeah, so you're right. When you deploy troops to Iraq and then you redeploy a unit, is when they come back. So he's just completed the process of redeployment, but of course he's in an entirely new environment with new challenges and stresses. So yeah, it's supposed to be an unqualified good, right? You return home, you kiss your wife who's been patiently waiting for you. Hopefully, that doesn't happen for everybody in the story. Like the guy who returns home and just everything's gone, which is a true story, by the way. And he's like no idea where his wife is. But yeah, it's supposed to be an unqualified good, but in fact there are all sorts of challenges that are associated with it. And one of the things for, in relation to trauma, the New Yorker piece, do you know the part where they're talking to Jonathan Shea, who talks about the breakdown of social trust? Do you remember this part from the New Yorker essay? In his book, Achilles in Vietnam, Shea says, one of the important parts of recovery is if you can tell the story to another person and sort of have confidence that they could then tell it on to another person and hold some kind of faith with the spirit of what you had told them. So, and that's, he says if people can reach that, then they've recovered a lot. The simple process of telling a story is not the same as memory, okay? To go back to my same friend who wrote the memoir, he took for his novel things that happened in real life, and he changed them for the novel. And I was talking to him, and he said, when he goes back and thinks about it, he can't always remember what was the thing that he wrote in the novel and what was actually real, right? Memory is a sort of difficult thing. And in fact, memory, when you tell a story, you're not telling what actually happened, right? Your brain has processed it into a narrative. With intense traumatic memory, according to Shea and Judith Herman, you've heard about a Vietnam flashback, right? What you're getting is not a narrative, right? You actually feel like you're there, you're experiencing it. One vet described it to me as he said, it's not that you hear, like a car backup or whatever, and it sounds like an IED. It's that for that second, it is an IED, right? And it's not just the IED. You might have some strange, intense visual perception of something that you experienced at the time that you're going back to, that is utterly unconnected because we're constantly taking in a mass of information, right? There's like some strange guy sitting in the corner over there. There are pictures on the wall. There's all these things that if you were to tell the story of being here in this classroom, the narrative cuts all of that out into sort of meaning for your life that you're giving to the story and trying to impart to another reader. And that is sort of healthy memory, okay? But whereas the intensely traumatic memory is not under your control in that way. And so the process of being able to tell about it is one of the reasons that they have vets write about these things, or like painting, or various things. Is the process of reinterpreting it into a frame where you can then express that to another human being means that you have to sort of achieve some sort of mastery over what you've been through, right? And that's helpful. And then there's a chaplain in my unit who was hit by an IED, and he was fine, but it's scary. And he didn't even really realize how bad he felt, but he showed up. There was like a event where a bunch of people were going to be. This is in Iraq, and he shows up early, and there's like one person comes like, "Oh, I heard you were in an IED." He's like, "Yeah," and he tells a story. And then another person comes, and they say, "Oh, I heard you were in an IED." And he tells a story again, and more people come. And he keeps telling the story over the night, and he realizes that by the end of the night, he told the story a bunch of times, and he actually felt better. Now, so if you can't do that, right? If it's too painful, too difficult, if you don't trust that you could tell the story to someone and that they would understand, then that's a difficult situation for you to be in. Okay? It makes you feel isolated from other humans. We're social creatures. We need that. We need a sense of social trust. And if you don't have that, if you think that something that's sacred to you, that's incredibly important, is also something that nobody could ever understand, that's a really bad situation to be in.
Well, that's exactly what happened in redeployment with the soldier and his wife, their interaction. She asks him, how are you, meaning how did it go? And he basically says good, and he doesn't go any further. And I'm wondering if he's leaving all of that out because he thinks that she can't understand it.
He's worried, right? She asks him, and he thinks she's asking him, "Are you crazy now?" Right? And he's not ready. It's too recent to really go into it and to be able to get it all out. But in my mind, he's telling this story, which is a good sign. But certainly, yes, when he comes back, he's not willing to tell her, and he's not sure of how it's going to be perceived. He's not sure if he's going to fall into the crazy vet stereotype, right? That like, oh, I'm just some traumatized guy. Like, he feels like he's okay. He can go about his day. He can do things. He doesn't want to do a lot right now. He's exhausted. He's been through incredibly stressful time. He needs some downtime. Certainly at that moment, he's not ready yet.
Could you say a little bit about what kind of preparation you're given when you're returning back to the United States? Just like sort of to foster a normal transition?
I mean, there's
Did they give you a pamphlet?
Yeah, it depends on different units. There's some things that they do, and for one of the things is they don't just, if they can avoid it, don't just bring you like, you're going out doing intense patrols, kicking down doors and everything, and all of a sudden you go back.
That's like going to Kuwait for a while before you go home, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, in this unit, in the story, they go to Camp Takadam, which is a logistics base, and there's an area of Takadam called Hotel California. I don't know if I mentioned this in the story, but this is where a lot of units that were coming out, would sort of sit there for a couple weeks and play cards and masturbate and joke around with each other and watch movies and just be bored Marines sort of coming down from that experience, which is good. There are classes that you go through that I mentioned in the story. The don't beat your wife, don't abuse alcohol, don't drink and drive, don't do drugs. There's help if you need it. When I came back, there was a very quick there's like a survey that you take. Did you see anybody die? Did anybody close to you die? Were you in direct combat? just trying to find out the risk factors. They're trying, you know, they're trying to get better for those sorts of things. Also, when you come back, an important part of it is they don't release you just yet, right? So you come back to the States, you don't get leave. There's something called block leave, where a unit will sort of, you know, about half the unit will go home for like 2 weeks, and the other half will sort of man the fort, and then they'll come back as it go. They won't give you that for about a month, usually. It depends, very soon to you. And the reason for that is, even though these guys get back and they just want to go home, it's actually much better for them to have a little bit of time stateside, surrounded by people who just went through what they went through, right? Because, you know, the narrator may not be able to talk to his wife about what happens, but he can talk to, you know, McManigan, and, you know, Greeley, and, you know, the drunk Mormon and the sober Mormon, like those guys know. So he can talk to them and have a chance to process what he went through and put it into words with people who he knows will know what he's talking about, because, you know, they had this incredibly close bond that's formed through being in a really terrible place together. And then they'll get leave, and it'll give them more time to wind down. And, you know, they'll, like, half days. They're not going through anything very aggressive. They'll get a 4-day weekend the first weekend. It's meant to be a slow period where they're still attached to, you know, a unit that's supposed to be looking out for one another. In the way that those guys, when the one guy comes home and his wife is gone, they're like, somebody's going to be with this guy the entire time, because we don't want him to kill himself. And that's, you know, that's a piece of it. There's official classes, and there's, you know, screening and other things.
But they try to keep structure going.
But the structure is an important piece. Not like a stressful structure, but there's a structure where the people are, you know, you have to come in, you'll do PT. You can't just sort of, you know, go home and collapse and do nothing and have no contact with other human beings, because that's not helpful. And you need to be tied into this network that, if it's functioning right, you know, the Marines will look after each other. You know, they're very accustomed to it after, you know, having gone through this experience, having each other's back, and supposed to keep that process. One of the things in the New Yorker is the Wounded Warriors Barrack. Mm-hmm. You guys notice that? Which makes sense. Guys who are injured or traumatized, all put in one unit, so that they're not just sort of, all right, you can't be in the Marine Corps anymore because you're injured. No, you stay in the military, and you have a structure and a support network of people who've been through similar experiences.
Can you talk a little bit about the first sentence? You brought it up before as the thing that gave you the voice for this character.
Yeah.
And with my juniors, when we talked about it, one of the things that really struck them, maybe the thing that struck them the most, was the narrator's voice, particularly in that first line, which is really, it's a disturbing first line.
Yeah.
Although he delivers it in almost sort of a detached way. And then you see it in other places, but particularly at the end of the story, where he's very kind of clinically describing the steps that he's going to go through to shoot the dog. And the line that's somewhere in the middle of the story that I think of is your brain chemistry changes.
Right.
And I was wondering if you felt there's a connection there, like his brain chemistry changes, so he starts to talk in this way that's symptomatic of maybe what's psychologically going on with him.
Exactly. You know, he's telling the story because it's important to him, and he finds the things upsetting, but he's distanced from it as a protective measure, right? And that's got to come across in the voice. Also, he's a military guy, right? You talk about a lot of things very bluntly, and he's not sentimental, you know. He doesn't see himself that way. He probably sees himself as a warrior, right? And so he sort of, when I wrote the first line, I knew who the narrator was, and that doesn't always happen